Oh, okay.
But I'll send it. What's best to share it to you? Just share on Facebook. That one won't work now. So I'll send you a new one. What should I do with the podcast? With that conversation for another. They got an idea of who to have on it.
I'll tell you, I have no idea about something, but it's not from the sponsorship.
No, I'm just thinking, basically, I'm going to try and make great. I've done one there's other ones. Yeah. I've got the animator of it, yeah. So maybe this is the one we're going to do for our edition.
That's brilliant.
It's all about. This is maybe.
I love the aesthetic. I have to get back. I mean, I'm not really going to speak and I'm not speaking for the reason. And for after the injury, I couldn't do sound, I couldn't do anything, really sound. I spent many years just doing stills because stills are the only thing my brain today. Yeah, anyway, long story short, NFT is only about movement and animation. So thank you for that. Not but then I was best. But they kind of inspired me to get back into videos and movements. But then I stopped it because NFT collapsed, and I got back to doing transition. But I still have the NFT kind of. I did a PFP kind of series, and so far, the PFPs that were all the characters. Yeah, so I did that. And my characters. And I'm doing
If it's like, if you do it back then, it gives you more value now.
Yeah. And I put it exactly, and I put the characters in a music video, like nothing is playing. And I'm doing like a little pocket book of like twisted motivational quotes, a little bit like taking the piece of understand. I'll be able to a taste of that. And each character has to say, but I'm also doing the NFT. It's like, yeah, it's really cute. I hope, so it's, but what is it? But I was waiting for it kind of to become where is it? These are the type of and I have about 300 of them. So it's nice to hear that. Cool. It's like you have your own point.
it's all quite throwaway. But again, like, I don't know, like, so I'm not sure about it. It's a lot of people who do this. So it's like, well, I don't know.
I don't know anything about it.
Well, they do it by year.
Because they buy the deep point,
Yeah,
yeah. Well, but I suppose it's acting like a stock market.
Yeah.
I love the forex exchange. I always using money for exchanges between pound and other currencies. I lost money 6 months ago because I made the wrong decision, and that is their official policy that think they want to do. So anyone that does any kind of trade, if you don't want to risk, just don't trade anything. Just buy an apartment in London. Something like that. Yeah, buy a car. That's the one thing that we don't have access to. I think it depends because like if you like your practice have a lot of hype and a lot of celebrities who are like sponsoring like a portrait I would like to say that.
Okay, everybody. Thanks very much for your patience. Now, our first witness is David. Do you want to just say next slide whenever you need me to advance?
Yeah. Well, when Martin said, let's talk about AI, I said, okay, let's see if I can make an animation film. Next slide.
Oh, Tom, do you want to actually? Tom, do you mind? Thanks, driving that one.
Okay. I have to confess, I'm here on false pretenses. I'm an engineer who aspires to be an animator. And I'm hoping that Martin and Will and the guys at Farnham will save me from a death, a horrible death as a boring engineer. And hopefully I'll die as a qualified animator. So I'm a BA on my gravestone. So if anyone's going to cheat at AI, it's me. So Jim there, who's my mate, he's absolutely devoted to AI. It's taken over the world, everything's fabulous, it's really horrific and so on. So anyway, we had a go. So next slide. Right, that's how it turned out. Engineers are arrogant. Why engineers should want to do animation, I don't know. But anyway, we're arrogant, an arrogant bunch, and I'm arrogant as well. So doesn't get knocked out of me by Martin, I'm sure. Next one. Okay, so I produced. Now, right, I wanted to make the film I wanted to make, not one of whales swimming down Oxford Street that AI wanted to make. I want to make a film I wanted to make, and I knew Jim would be upset because basically I decided that the outcome of AI is going to be a legal case somewhere. Does AI learn? In other words, it's inspired in the same way that I'm inspired by Chuck Jones, or does it steal? Or is it changing from one to the other? And so I decided that in this case, the film will be about a legal beagle. If you get put, if you do an AI beagle, you'll get Snoopy. So I drew a legal beagle, and the men in the white wigs are going to decide, will decide eventually on what is theft and what isn't. And so I made up I made a script, I put some ideas together, I put some pictures together and said, right, Jim, can you animate that then? Anyway, back came the reply. Next slide. Yeah, it was a bit evasive, but on the phone call, he said, could I provide the animations? So I said to Jim, I thought that's what AI would do. He said, well, no, not really. And don't spend too much time on them because I'm not sure they'll work. Just one or two maybe. Most text images offers free trials, and they're a bunch of robbers, and it doesn't work. And it doesn't do things when you follow the prompts. And it's not the lawyers, it's the scammers who are scamming everybody on the internet, trying to tell them to sell you all this AI software. So, I'm stuffed. I promised Martin a video. What should I do? Next slide. So I went on the internet, and it's pretty obvious who they're aiming it at. Certainly not anyone like me, and they're obviously looking for clickbait. So, yeah, there's nothing wrong with anime. I love it. I mean, it's great, but it wasn't what I wanted. Next slide. So I found a tutorial that looked sensible. So I got the owner back and stole his IP. So the rest of this is non-AI, manual, not intelligence, looking through what he actually produced. And he said, I spent 150 hours making my own anime with AI. A 1-minute anime in 150 hours. Right, given that I would have made that Beagle video in a couple of days using PowerPoint, because I'm not an animator yet. But I'd use PowerPoint, a couple of days would have done it. Right, so let's see, next slide. Yeah, and what he came up with at the beginning, yes, this looks really good. Maybe it's easy after all. Could I be wrong? No, be assured, AI is going to be good eventually, one day, maybe. Next slide. Anyway, he started off with the story. ChatGPT, something like that. No, he wrote it, he stole it from the Matrix and just wrote it down. 1 minute, so it was. Right, so that was a bit disappointing. And then he produced a manual storyboard. And I thought, this is an engineering type producing a storyboard, this hunt yet. So that wasn't a very good start, was it? Next slide. Then the producer couldn't draw. Now, I can't draw, but I have a go at it. And I'm sure if Will were here, he'd be criticising me like mad. But anyway, the producer couldn't draw, so he used rotoscoping and showed how, obviously here, Max Fleischer animation, which is a good example. Next slide. And rotoscoping is a 100-year-old technique, so I hardly think it's AI. And obviously in doing this, the technique that you're starting to come up with is they're looking at various kinds of edge detection. So this is straight out, this is very old technology that's having some additions added so that the computer is able to distinguish the positions of things and the edges of articles and separate them out. Very positive. There's one very good video I saw where someone actually took a film and he got the two characters there, and by identifying the outlines, the film was able to separate these two characters. Okay, that's great, but it's rotoscoping. It's not the sort of artistic animation you'd expect here. Again, hardly high tech. This has been around 100 years. Next slide. What about the 12 principles of animation then? Don't mention that. That did not go down by this, I can tell you. So we'll forget about that, it's too hard. Next slide. Okay, another problem for engineers. We're a pretty dull lot, really. We've had any kind of creativity beaten out of us over, in my case, a 5-year apprenticeship. So creativity, no. And therefore acting is really difficult. And you know what? Even with rotoscoping, you've got to act a bit. And then it was, oh, why did I choose a dialogue scene? Because lip sync's really difficult. Because obviously he's not got any of the timing charts. He's relying on rotoscoping, but his dialogue's being recorded separately. So he's going to be sort of stretching frames and all the rest of it that you end up bodging when you're not a proper animator. So that was another problem. Next one. Okay, he then got really enthusiastic about creating, in fact, in another video, creating your model sheets and so on. And that was a bit hard if you can't draw. And that could take a long time. It's a bit difficult. So they went from, we'll use our own database to teach the models, which I thought was really good, good intentions. And, okay, well, we'll just go off and use the internet, which is, I think some of us here, and probably I agree, is stealing artwork from the internet. But it isn't a direct, I've pinched your picture, there it is. It's I've pinched your picture and a load of others. It's the same process that we use. Like, I'm really inspired by Chuck Jones. I don't think I would ever think my animation was as good as Chuck Jones, but I still take cues from those sorts of people. And I think that's where legally we need to start finding out who owns the inspiration. It probably doesn't matter if you're an amateur, but it really does matter if you're going to make millions out of it. And if you make millions, please remember a poor old pensioner. Just remember me and you will, on my will, that'll do. Next. Right, so obviously we went on the internet and all sorts of lots of technical stuff here about diffusion and all the rest of it. But nevertheless, using what were obviously public pictures or pictures on the internet and creating pseudo drawings. I mean, we've been producing pseudo drawings by doing sort of change something using a pencil or a pen or whatever for years. It's nothing new. So sort of AI is improving the quality of what we've been doing for yonks. Next one. And all of them saying, I can produce an anime in 35 seconds. Why anime? Well, it's popular. It is very popular and very much enjoyed, and goes from really, really poor quality animation, which is little more than an animated comic, right up to Miyazaki. It's got a huge fan base, so if you're looking for clickbait or to sell a cheap program, you've got it there in anime. But also it has huge numbers of rules. I don't know whether people program it into AI, but for instance, here the tropes. Now, every kind of young lady you can imagine are all defined, which is, from someone who's worked in the computer industry, definitions of what we like. You know, wow, we can make something really work with that. So anime has this structure that kind of, I think, really helps. And then there's a huge amount of uncontrolled fan art. It's all there, so yippee, they're able to use it and have lots of benefits. But I don't think there's anyone here who produces anime. Next. Okay, off he goes. He's going to start now. And what he found was that his system was processing each frame individually. Oh dear, and every one of them here, you notice, is slightly different. So 2,400 frames is slightly different. So that's using a lot of computing power. He had to rent computer capacity to do it, and needed a lot of frigging about to get a consistent character. I didn't understand what he was doing. I think you did. You do. Yeah, but this was certainly a big thing that he went through that was something that would have defeated me completely. But yeah, 24 frames a second is an awful lot of processing power. Next. And clearly the guy was getting absolutely fed up, and he said, well, that's just a background, we'll have a picture. So stole one from somewhere or another. I think that's from The Matrix or something, that blue and pink pills. I take lots more colours than that every day. So he started blatantly stealing stuff, and okay, fine, he's doing a demonstration. I don't mind. Next, voice acting. Yippee! Of course, we've got lots of voice programs. Oops. In that one there, you can see it's got 4 different characters, ladies, gentlemen. I don't know if the announcer on Radio 4 is AI. He sounds like it. He's very ill. The voice acting wasn't easy. Again, he's an engineer acting. Why not go and get an actor to do it? There's plenty of them down in Farnham. And he very easily, and you could tell how he was very easily ending up in the uncanny valley. You could tell it wasn't right. Not that it wasn't good, it just wasn't right. And he was aware of that, this guy. Next. So anyway, at the end, I thought, really, AI's done it. No, it hadn't. The whole thing had to be finished off in After Effects. Fair enough. Lots of people use After Effects, but it's not AI. And he then edited it in Final Cut Pro. So this is a 1-minute animation that's ending up using pretty much conventional editing and post-processing. So that's fine. Then he realised that anime is at 12 frames a second, so he had to slow it all down to make it look like anime. And actually, anime goes from 8 to 12 frames or more, and anything like slow in, slow out will disappear. So again, that wasn't terribly AI, but nevertheless, it made it look better, look more anime. The animation wasn't so good. Next. Okay, so 1 minute of second-rate animation. I think we could say that an anime of this type isn't what necessarily we expect from good artistic animation. Using a stolen story, rotoscoped images, stolen model sheets, and stolen background artwork took 150 hours. Fair enough. That's 4 weeks. I've got better things to do in my life. Next. Okay, I did a cost comparison. I may have got this slightly wrong, but it's not far out. I was told by a very charming ex-animator from Farnham that when they're pushed, they do a foot a day at 24 frames a second, which she said was about a second a day. So I assumed they could do 2 foot a day at 12 frames a second, 3 foot a day with an allowance for limited animation techniques and not using the 12 rules. So an animator would take 20 days to do it, 140 hours, and using AI rotoscoping and stolen artwork, 21 days or 150 hours. And why anyone like Disney would take engineers who are rare as hen's teeth and use them to replace animators who are also rare as hen's teeth, I have no idea. No, if you've got skills, use them. It may mean we've got to retrain animators. It may mean we've changed the way we work, which might be really exciting. But why cut down your opportunities for manning your company? Next one. So what we're up against, what we're all afraid of, and maybe we don't need to be. This was Chuck Jones on Leon Schlesinger. Schlesinger was actually out for the money and he didn't care how he got it. Recognise that? He was very lazy in the sense that he never bothered us. He didn't want to have to make artistic decisions. He wanted the pictures to go out, play and make money. And that, I guess, describes Disney nowadays. They are they're really having to churn stuff out, and all that wonderful work that Walt Disney did, despite being fascist, is kind of rather going to waste. Next one. So AI is just a tool, self-learning systems. Been around for donkey's years, it's getting better and better, but according to IBM, it is years and years, maybe a decade, of actually being intelligent. It passes the Turing test because it seems intelligent, and it is slightly more intelligent than a lot of people from where I live in Aldershot, but we'll put that aside. At the moment, it's a bit opportunistic. Businessmen seem to want to use AI to steal IP from social media. And our careless use of social media may have made things worse. Maybe we could have been more careful, more thoughtful before we went to it. But there are existing laws, plagiarism, copyright, theft. I think we've got to make sure that from a legal perspective, we understand AI so that we can then lobby and get the proper rules in place. Engineers would hate that. They just want to be allowed to do as they like. As artists, we've got to say, here's the limit. If you use my art, you've got to pay for it. Because I've got to make a living. If I didn't pay, took your car that you've designed and drove it away without paying for it, you'd be upset as well. So we all have to pay each other because that's how we live. So, action, guys. Man in the barricades.
And I think we're
That's it.
applause for that. A few questions before we move on to our next speaker. While David's talk is fresh in our minds, does anyone have
Please don't
any?
throw me out the window.
Any takers? Or we could always press
I
on.
think it's a very entertaining talk, but I think it's unrealistic in that there is such good stuff about. I mean, I could show you something that my friend made in 2 hours, which looks like a festival film, and I will show you if we have time. I don't think it's realistic to think that it's so impossible. You know, I remember when I was a student at the Royal College of Art and computers were just coming in. I remember my teachers going, "A computer will never be able to make animation. No, it will never be able to make animation." And we all went, 4 of us went to try out computers, and they said, "No, don't bother." And I can just remember that sort of panicky, sort of dissing of a new technology, I think is not helpful. I think it's not realistic, it's not helpful. I think we've all seen beautiful stuff actually made with AI. I think it's probably true what you say, that to just go in and expect to be able to do it straight away, it takes expertise for sure. But
That was
I don't-
exactly the point I was making.
Yeah.
It
But
is-
I mean, it
it is-
takes AI, you need to know your program.
You've got
You
to
need
know what you're doing.
Find the right, yes, absolutely.
And what we've actually got to do is create an environment in which that happens. So I was actually animating with Disney Animation Studio in the 80s, and it was a real challenge. It was really difficult. So you're absolutely right, 100% right. It ain't going to go away. It's going to be there. What we've got to do is the untraditional.
Yeah, and also, is it realistic to say, well, if we're, I don't know what everyone thinks, is it, can you tell if you've been plagiarised? If you're one of like 1,000 sources for somebody's animation?
That's why we need expertise to actually tell us what is the new law around copyright and plagiarism.
Sorry, no, go for it.
Rather than this being a sort of a production issue, I think you can also look at it from the consumption side, and sort of a media literacy side, because it feels like this kind of wave of AI-generated content is pretty much inevitable. And some of it's going to be great, some of it's going to be, I don't think most of it's going to be absolute trash. I mean, we already see a lot of generative work out on YouTube, which is like systematically lowering the standards of people. And, we see these kids that are raised on these kind of like really strange YouTube videos, which are like, okay, here's Spider-Man and Elsa from Frozen, who kind of go and rob a bank together. And like, there's like thousands and thousands of these videos put out there. Like this guy, James Bridle, wrote an essay all about how concerned he was about all this kind of generated like crap that's effectively out there. And I think we should be worried about the sort of people that that's creating, and we need to sort of think, rather than worrying about like, are they stealing from us or not? It's like, how do we train people to actually say, oh, this is good stuff, this is bad stuff? How can we sort of create a culture that really values the good stuff? And I don't know how to do that necessarily, but I feel like this battle has already been lost in a way.
I actually made a sly comment there that where I come from, an older shop, it's renowned in Hampshire and Surrey as being a very poor area. And you see an awful lot of people who don't make that decision as to whether stuff is of good quality or not. And you're absolutely right. If people will watch it, we can't do anything about it. Does it matter if they're showing that AI produced stuff that is rubbish and people are prepared to pay someone to do it? It's not affecting us.
Yeah, but I think that on top of that, it's important to recognize that what Ruth said, which is the AI has the capability to create some really fantastic new stuff and to sort of like help us think in new different ways. And as artists, I think it would be a shame to sort of to close off that possibility.
Only had 5 minutes. Okay, well, shall we move on to our second speaker, Alan? I'm just going to have to move the technology around. Alan, do you mind to, there's a switch on the, the speaker thing at the back of the box. Do you mind turning that off, because we're getting quite a loud hum and as we're not showing any. I think it's the switch on the dial on the left-hand side.
There's two
On off.
dials, one above the other.
Yeah, one of them is on off. Okay, I'll
The top one.
yeah.
Dennis is Joe.
Oh my God.
See your fingers in the subside.
No, there's one from a fridge or something.
Yeah, maybe it is. Okay,
Yeah,
sorry,
that's the fridge.
all right, sorry everyone for breaking everything up.
Fairness, it's a very similar hum that comes out of the speaker.
Yeah.
But that's a fridge.
But it's the fridge. I did try to turn off the fridge earlier on this evening.
Today, is there anything in it?
It was not. There are 4 bottles of water.
It's one life. Yes.
It's not going to turn off.
No,
I've already tried.
Yeah, if you change the temperature inside.
Can you make sure you put that back afterwards? All right. Okay, well, let's proceed to our second speaker, Alan Snow. Yeah.
My perspective, large, as much as I'm trying to make a living variation full time. And I have worked almost all my professional life since about 1985-86 doing graphics, graphic images, animation, and illustration work. And during this time, I worked as an art Bermuda Shores, various other things. And all the time, because like when I went to do art at the early 90s, it was at the end of a really interesting period where there was a kind of democratization of media. What had happened was the speed of computers had got us from the stage where people could do typesetting to word processing, and then into bitmap-based image editing, into slowly getting into actual moving real-time video about in a small way. And so over each of these stages, it was a sort of industry disruptor for each of those industries that it moved through. And there is one of my favorite quotes, and I can't be sure exactly who said it, was that everybody should have to can write books, but nobody should have to read them. And with this democratization, it doesn't necessarily give people the skills to write a story or have the skills and input into these things. Now, I have had the pleasure and good fortune to work with some astonishing animators and filmmakers. And when you see the skills that they've put into these things, AI comes up and everybody starts getting very jumpy. If you start looking, go online and you actually look and see what Aaron Blaze is saying about his experiences of looking at AI stuff, he's excited because he actually says, oh, well, in 1937, people were rotoscoping like crazy. Not only were they rotoscoping, they were copying pieces of action from one film into another film. So they wanted this was thing, but this was being driven by economic imperative, etc. So you sort of say there's all these things about AI, and you sort of think, well, actually, if you look at the production process, part of my thing was I worked on commercials, and when you are working on commercials, everybody wants a different style. Practically, this is how you sell a commercial. So what happens is you sort of think, right, what we've got to do is we've got to assemble these things, and you're looking at all the time. You're looking at, how do we get the new look? How do we get this? How do we put this together? How do we make it impactful? And the novelty, and in the budgets in the 90s gave you the ability to experiment and do things. Admittedly, it was the kind of, I don't know if people know the 2 from 3 rule, which is money, time, or art. You could only ever have two of them. Well, I think this is very true. And I was involved in the first 3 commercials that Aardman ever did on computer. And when that happened, there was, I went into Aardman because I've been involved in some, I taught myself how to do stuff in CG. And someone put up a poster on the wall, which they printed out themselves, which said, what can a computer do? It can draw a square. And they'd stuck this on the wall as this kind of protest about what computers could do. Fairly shortly after I was in there, people wanted to know how they could replace plates and put stuff in the background, etc., and do combining and compositing. And the other thing that was happening was when you moved into 3D, you suddenly were reliant on building rigs, because people hadn't really done rigging on 2D structures. People have done animation and sort of like limited animation, like out of Hanna-Barbera and those 50s things, where you were using reuse and stuff like that. But it was the first time in 3D where you were actually building stuff. And then that moved into building 2D rigs. Now, 2D rigs have, in the last 20 years have almost invariably been vector-based images, like vector forms. But that's changing. So what's happening is bitmap stuff and rigging of drawn things is getting better and better, and you can build quite complex 2D, sort of very watercolory, all sorts of things. I mean, you look at what has happened with the kind of like Quentin Blake things that were done up north, stuff like that. That's starting to look good. Now, through each of these processes, there has been, if you actually look at them all individually, a lot of them have been aided by machine learning. Like whether there be filters for, like converting imagery, or now a lot of stuff in 3D, a lot of stuff was done with motion capture and the editing of motion capture data and applying it to 3D forms. And whether you like that or not, it's not far away from Disney rotoscoping. Motion capture data is basically a form of rotoscoping. You can see it that way. So what bits of it are difficult, because it's happening. It's at the moment it's pretty primitive. And if you actually look at the individual components of building a piece of animation, it's not that useful in a lot of places. When you actually look at the sort of sections, I mean, you can generate an image, you can generate a character, but you can't even generate a turnaround for doing different views. You can do audio, you can do temporary audio for lip sync. It does do lip sync now, and lip sync's been available within the Adobe products for about 7 years, something like that, in Character Animator and Animate. Actually quite good. So because I work largely on my own, I'm keeping my eye on this stuff, because I'm trying to work out how to make my production cycle economically possible in very difficult times. These are difficult times for animators particularly, and broadcasters. I mean, what's happening is it's a bit like the NHS being screwed over. That's what's happened to the public broadcasters here. So what's happened is that you're trying to work out how can these things be done, and you take it on. And of course, I have been checking. There are some software sites where you can check online to see whether your stuff has been included in models, AI models, and my stuff has been included in AI models. So I've like pasted up, please do, like the please opt out. And I have avoided over the last 10, 15 years putting my stuff online anyway, because I just try and avoid social media. It's one of the things I do. So I don't know. There's an enormous amount of theft. There is absolutely theft. It cannot be denied. When the woman from YouTube or Google was cornered about, have you been scraping AI video? She just looked embarrassed and said, oh, I don't know. But there was clearly bollocks. What has happened with there in the ChatGPT, there is a section called Books 2. And Books 2 are probably between 11 and 25,000 copyright works they've put in illegally and included in the models. You only have to say, do something in the style of Martin Amis, and you'll start getting some aping of those things out, and you can start to get things. And so it is very clear that these things have been done. Now, what my worry is, or one of my big worries is, that the creative industries are very unimportant to government in terms of lobbying, and not enough noise is being made. I think a serious amount of noise needs to be made, because otherwise the people that are going to influence it are going to be the defence industry, security, and things like Chatham House. They are going to be the political things that come in on it. What they don't really look at, and there's characters like Mars Blue Zoo and Dave Sprox and Ex Hardman, who've been lobbying around tax breaks for animation. And the same people are now trying to lobby against, exploitation in AI models. But we're a small country, a small powers. But it's much more likely to happen in France because people get a little shirty there. I don't know what can be done, but I would say take action if you can. And what I don't think that people quite realise is that the welcoming of ChatGPT into your life is a very strange thing to do, because who has just been appointed to the board of ChatGPT? One of the senior executives from CIA. Elon Musk has just withdrawn his objection to what's happened at ChatGPT, and the speculation is that the American government has lent on him. And what has happened is that basically the NSA and various other people are plugging into the back of it, and all of that is coming into our lives or taking away from us. So that is more important in their minds than anything to do with creative industries. And it does worry me. I mean, I think this personal privacy, these people do not have this right into our lives, but we allow it, and we should not allow it. We should close it down. They are our government. They're not theirs. I mean, the question is, where's the money? But you see, you look in the States, what's happening at the moment, just in the elections, where people are putting money into the Republican Party. It's all the big boys with money, because what they're doing is it's all about the preservation of their money. It's about building bigger vacuum cleaners to suck more into their big coffers. But I feel mixed. It is there are some astonishing tools. At the moment, it's deeply frustrating. And someone asked me, will you be using it? And the question, I said, well, my USP is I can draw. So I may as well try and use that thing. I mean, if you're trying to bang out another Peppa Pig, which is simple vector forms, or any of those things, well, what is the differentiator in terms of the animation? Okay, you get style down. You could probably stylistically put together a Peppa Pig using something like that. But actually, what is more important is actually the story behind it. And at the moment, if you look at the way that story is constructed using ChatGPT or Claude, they're not that great. They're not that great. And besides, what is it that you're trying to do? It may be that there's not enough money in animation for the tools to go in that direction. Because actually, what are the tools, how many copies of, shall I say, Toon Boom get bought in the UK? Or, any of the cartoon animators and things like that. It's not big money. And those things are incredibly expensive. And when lots of people are closing down the data sets to these people, it may be that it becomes prohibitive. And also there's that whole kind of ecology of it. I mean, the ecological aspect of it. Someone quoted me that it's between 1,000 and 50,000 times more energy is used in making an inquiry using ChatGPT than doing a search in Google. I mean, what's the morality of that? The state we're in? I don't know. So I have mixed feelings. That's my view. I have, so about 3-4 weeks ago, I was going to the CMC, which is the Children's Media Conference in Sheffield, and I was pitching a new animation. And before I noticed that AI was on the agenda for a couple of talks there. And in the corner of one of the talks, it's had a link to, we will be discussing our workshop that will be holding in London. So I decided to go to the workshop. Anyway, very interesting. Held in a very large law firm in central London. And 40 people from creative industries. And I mean, some fairly big people were there. We were divided into teams for the day and asked to push how far we could take AI in a day on a creative product, to see how far we could go. And it was fairly remarkable. But at the same time, you get banged up hard against the limitations. One of the things that we did was using there's a 2D engine that does manga and anime, and it is actually easier to generate a blue pig than a person other than Japanese or white. It's been so trained on traditional anime that you can't, break out of this. And this happens in lots of other areas as well, where the model's done. So a lot of this, but then there was some of the problem, I don't know if people know about the black Nazis that Google locked up. So what happened was Google, on their image generation, thought, we've got to make sure that it's open, inclusive. And you could do a search on kind of generate me some pictures of Nazis from 1938 or something like that, and it would do sort of stormtroopers of African descent. So they had problems with that, and they had to shut it down quick. But yeah, anyway, so that's my thoughts. That's where I am with it, pretty much.
So far, the impression I'm getting is that there's unanimous condemnation and thus disgust of AI systems and the motives for them in rather different ways. Now, Ruth, you talked about someone producing a film that was festival quality. Can I come back to that in a second? I think, if it's okay, I'd love to hear more about that. Now, David, you were talking about broadly speaking, about how difficult it was in that particular case to produce anything using AI that was useful or any good? Broadly speaking, is that what you
Yeah,
say?
for someone who's not a professional, not
Okay.
huge amounts of experience.
Because that's a very good point. Now, Alan, you were talking about the danger from, if you like, big business and hoovering up and the devaluing of the creative industries. So we've kind of got three slightly diverging but consistent points of view. Would that be fair to say? I've summarised this very badly, but is there
Different strands.
different strands? That's what I mean.
I don't want to say I'm not anti-AI. I don't think I'm anti-AI, but I think if I was 30 years younger, I would be anti-AI. I just feel very glad to be old.
Don't feel like that, because AI is going to be a brilliant tool. It's just got to be AI that's a brilliant tool that is built into our society rather than takes it over.
Okay, I want that to hang in the air.
Can I just say something?
Yeah, sure.
For me as a creator, it's very important not to think in terms of either this or that, and to use it as a tool to do things that maybe other tools don't do. Like, for example, I've tried a few things and experimented a few things, and if I'm doing like a music video animation and I have like a little turnaround or a little transition that is a bit abstract, and I think that I can do generate 1 second, put 12 frames there, and I can start from my frame and do another, 11 frames, and it's still coming because like the first few frames that it generates, it stays in an clear style. It starts to kind of go more generic as it moves.
Okay.
So I used it a little bit like that, because why wouldn't I? It just kind of brings a different quirkiness to my video, but it doesn't mean that this is like an AI video. It's just like maybe the transitions or the B-roll, the background, and why wouldn't I use that to complement as an assistant? So I like to think in the sense of like a little assistance or I see it, to be honest, just as a different tool, and it depends how you use it, because you can use it in so many different forms.
Yeah.
And I've also trained models with my own images, and kind of, it was really interesting because it generated little animations in my style, but not in my style. It's kind of difficult to explain, and it's just so many things you can do. You can do that and then download the single frames and then put it back to After Effects, remove a few frames and put yours. So I found it to be very interesting for more abstract animation and for transitions. Yeah, for character is useless because, like what you said, is like the characters are always blue and it's always chibi and it's always the same. So like all my characters I draw and I either do Procreate Dreams or Puppet or Work or whatever. For like background effects, I find it to be really interesting. And if it exists, why wouldn't I use that to my advantage as a creator? Now, as for the ethical part of things, like obviously if you're training your model, that's different. But if you're using their model and it's transformative and it's only the few first frames, is that bad? Is not bad? I don't know, because obviously it's like the same thing for a collage artist. That someone that is ethical will know how to use in a transformative way and is a new piece. Someone that is not ethical will just read the whole piece. So I think that it's not about the tool, it's the person is using it, because you can rip someone off with AI, with Photoshop, or with a transfer paper, really. Yeah, that's my take, actually. Or a contract, yeah.
So you're saying that as a specific tool within parameters, there is good potential there.
Yeah, for sure, especially if you are like the director of your project, because you can do things without having to have a budget, a Disney budget. It can like help you do things that, I think is very good for special effects and abstract animation. And I think it is also creative if you know how to use it. There are apps, they are really generic and will create generic animation mediocre for mediocre audience, I suppose. But there's all kinds of apps that if you really learn how to program it, and it's not easy, it's not like press a button and it does. Like I've been experimenting with D4, which is like a Python notebook that uses AI, and you can use it, like I said, from the first frame, or you can put as many frames as you want and just generating, because there's so many things you can do. You have to program the camera movements, and until you get something good, it takes time. And it's in the end, like in my experience, it only worked for the effects and background. But if I have something really clear in my head, I find it better to draw. It keeps to my style. But I also like to bring a little spice. I use it a little extra spice. Why not? That's my take.
So if I'm getting this right, Alan, your general view is that the evil occurs in the industry where mediocre is produced and people.
I don't know. It's blooming complicated. You see,
What I was about to say is the value is if you are a creative and you know what you are doing, an artist if you like. But the problem is where it's just greed and churning out product.
yeah, we're on the whole, I think most people work along the principles of do no wrong. Or we try to avoid. We try and do the best we can. And it's very difficult. I mean, if I had the ability to take my current drawings and tween them using AI and apply, envelopes, like easy envelopes on straight to the drawings, I would be very tempted, having done that in 3D. And in resets.
But that's the same thing that I mean. You, as an artist, as a creative, somebody who is highly skilled and you know what you're doing, then there's value. It's for those who don't have, who don't have those skills, who are just trying to churn out.
It's a source of the democratization. Why shouldn't people? Okay, you take the ethical position. You don't rip people off. But why shouldn't people have access? Why shouldn't you be? The problem is, if it gets to the stage where there were farming games, 5 or 10 years ago, where everybody had farming games on their phone, and a lot of the way these worked was they would test new versions to see if they were more addictive. And they would do subsets and fly out different versions to different groups of the audience to see who were. And are we going to end up in kind of, there was a point where everybody on, if you watch 20 videos on YouTube, you'd end up with Gangnam Style. And it's kind of whether you end up, if it can be organized in a way that you don't end up with dross. And it's about, to some extent, it's about curation. Because I think that one of the things about this, all this stuff, curation is really important about how you do this. I was at the BBC in Manchester last week, and they showed some stats on children's stuff. And for the under 6s, 70% of parents still trust the BBC more than YouTube and things like that. People do still trust those things, but we've got to have, and I think that's understandable, absolutely understandable. But it's the care we put to society about these things.
Can I mention something I forgot to say? Wasn't in the scope, but don't forget a large part of the animation industry is real time. That is gaming, live interactions, heavily mathematical, heavily processing, and learning about all sorts of things. That's probably a specialisation we haven't got. I just didn't want us to forget that is a huge industry as well. It's not non-animation, it's a huge part. In fact, it's bigger than Hollywood, isn't it? So.
Ruth, I mean, what you said a moment ago was quite frightening that someone had produced, if I got this right, someone had produced something of festival quality.
Well, I use festival quality, like, loosely. It was watchable, you might or might not have guessed that it was AI.
But was it all AI or because a lot of these
It was written by AI, voiced by AI.
Right.
But it's made by someone very experienced with AI who's very skilled at doing the prompts, at working, what when it gives you something, what you choose, what you reject. It's not like you press a button and it happens. And I thought, I can't remember who said it, but someone said something about, oh, well, AI, films are useless because the writing is useless. I think there's always going to be jobs for people with ideas, people who can, have really good ideas. But, if I'm teaching my students and they want to go and work at DreamWorks, God help them, there's not going to be work for those people who animate hair movies. It seems obvious it's going to be taken on by AI if it isn't already. A lot of those more technical jobs are surely going to go. And the question is, how much do we care about that, I think. I think about it a little bit like I did about the closing of the coal mines. It's really sad that people are losing their jobs, but I don't really want my kids to be working down a coal mine, and I don't really want them to be animating hair. But I don't know about some people, it's a choice, isn't it?
So that's a really good point. That comparison is one that's come up a lot. So I'm in the AI world fully for a few years now. I've seen, I think the problem with the coal mines is they were closed down with no other option for people. So there was no, the communities that existed on those industries weren't given another choice. We have a moment now where we can hopefully shift how those skills transition. And I think there are two really strong stories here. One is a story of the big tech firms closing their doors, creating closed language models, hiding their IP, and making it impossible to know where all that data is coming from, and making a lot of money out of it, probably at the expense of other people. Then on the other side, you've got what both of you two have said, is you've got filmmakers who've never had the opportunity to produce films of particular quality or scale because they don't have the budget or the teams or the access and networks. So the AI Film Awards that I ran in May, we had 6 continents represented out of 30 shortlisted people, which I think is pretty unusual for a film festival, especially a new film festival that had no traction previously. The winner was a collaborative duo of 2 women who left the film industry to have children and found it impossible to return, and only returned through meeting on Instagram. One was in New York, one was in France. They're called Ethereal Moon, it's their duo name. And they've gone back into making films, just the 2 of them, using AI, using NFTs to sell their work and make a living, in a way that they never could have done in the industry. So there's, we don't need to remind ourselves that the industry is a closed shop, very difficult to access, very exclusionary, and this is an opportunity for people to come in a different route and be creative. And I also think it's really important what you said about access to these tools. That entry point means we're going to get a lot of crap, but you have to have that crap in order to have that democratic access to allow people to come through. So I don't think we should be afraid of crap, as long as it's not exploitative and derivative.
I think to say one other thing, which was that on top of this thing about if it's possible to influence policy,
Yeah.
the other thing is, on the positive side, is actually to design the tools, be involved in designing the tools. If you actually think, what do you want as a filmmaker, storyteller? What is it that you actually, which part of the process you want to involve, or be, what is it going to be? Because actually, programmers and large corporations aren't necessarily going to be the people that are going to design good tools. So, coming from base up, it might be really interesting to think about what it is that you want from this. It's coming, but you can probably influence it to some extent by thinking about what tools it is that you want.
And making the ethical use of those tools profitable. That's the really key thing, coming back to the point of channeling the money. If we, as artists and creators who want to operate ethically, exclude ourselves from the development of these tools, then we leave it in the hands of the people who we don't want it to be in. Whereas if we use them, we can create a market for the ethical use for them, or we develop them ourselves, then people will invest in them and the money will, to some extent, I'm being a little idealistic here, but without channeling them, without proving the market case and the profitability of using things ethically, we haven't got hope in hell.
When it comes to designing a tool, it's a big question how a tool is designed. For example, you mentioned like these charts, and how the traditional animation was done. And it was done through these charts, and all the guys who work in this industry was working with these charts. And for them, it was like, okay, this is our like a fundamental thing, and where we start from. But it's just one of the points where you can start. And this is just the overall consensus. Okay, this is the easier for us to draw these frames if we have these charts, and then like these organizations of labor, and sometimes something disruptive happening, like invention of electricity or whatever. Because before you can't even imagine this approach. Like, okay, the wheel can rotate with some, I don't know, electrical spirits rotating the wheel or whatever. But actually, some scientists prove that it's not spirits. It's not spirit. It's some physical force. But it was unknown before, and I think they just. Sometimes this happens when something expands, like a new pocket in reality, or in a physical world, or it's like an invention or something, and it changes the whole approach. And in this case, I just don't know. There are two options. You can go with the previous approach, okay, we can make something easier, twinning is easier, or other thing is easier, but we stick to to our basic approach, like Disney approach. And this thing looks like it's totally different, because people just talking to these AI bots and getting something back. And as I tried that, most of the time it's something different. And I think this is the main problem there, because I was let's say raised in traditional environment, when you have a goal, you have the beginning and the set of tools to achieve this exact result we all planned. But maybe it will shift the whole paradigm that your result is not the final thing, like your planned result. Yeah? And the actual thing is when you play with these different AIs and get some results and just pick whatever you like, and it's never be what you like had in your head. Because what I got from working with these tools, I think they kind of like trying to avoid my exact like desire, because it doesn't matter how explicit I will be in explaining what I want to see. It will be like a little bit different all the time. Like you can't just get exactly what you want.
Sometimes it's like I chin.
Yeah.
You know, you're throwing questions, throwing or Brian, discrete strategies where you get that formulation that it might make you think something, and that is interesting. It is interesting.
This is the problem. It's interesting because you always have this problem between these two, like what I want and something unknown. That it's always interesting. Okay, it's exploded, and you was like, it was supposed to just man walking on the street, and then AI just animate this explosion, and I was like, oh, this is unexpected, and this is fun, but it's totally obvious. But I guess it still works for me, like a person who plays with this. It's fun, yeah, but it's just not what I wanted.
It's difficult to corral into storytelling. It's often very difficult to curate into the storytelling thing. And sometimes you're reversing out because thinking, well, here are these images, how can I use these to tell a story? It's the other way around. So,
Can I recommend now that we have a short break and then come back and see if we can draw some conclusions, put together a census, and perhaps even some kind of manifesto and an idea for what to do next. So can I have a big round of applause for our before we all expire and so on, we should have a short break. So thank you very much indeed. Should we say, I'm not actually sure what the time is because my phone is filming. What time? 9:30. Should we say a 10-minute break, and then we'll try to